Hola todos, hello everyone. So we're here to talk about Art Week. We're here to talk about Mexico City Art Week. Is it worth it? What did we see this time that we were here? Edgar came to Mexico City and we met up there and we visited a lot of different fairs, a lot of different gallery shows, a lot of different DIY spaces. So we're going to talk about that today. Is it worth it?
Is it worth it?
What do you think? Is it worth it? So first of all, cuéntanos, tell us a little bit about what Art Week is for those of us that want a little grounded explanation.
Yeah, so Semana del Arte or Art Week happens once a year, usually in February, and it is this massive explosion of art that happens all over Mexico City. There are everything from art fairs to galleries. There's a ton of self-organized and DIY events. And as you could imagine, because Mexico City is such a diverse and culturally rich space, there is just so much that you can tune into. And we just got back, so I'm like so excited for us to reflect on the time we had there. And yeah, definitely a good question for us to ask. Is it worth it? Should you go? Like, especially if you're considering, if you're on the fence, like, should you invest in going to Semana del Arte?
I love that. So here, your two fave Latinx Brujx are going to talk about this. I'm LineaDeLuz. I am a queer Latinx visual artist, and I'm working a lot within the digital sphere right now. And Edgar, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Edgar Fabián Frías. I am based in Los Angeles right now and multidisciplinary artist. Definitely work within the digital realms and do everything else, including performance, social practice, un poco de todo. And this is my third time going to Semana del Arte, and I feel like I've really come to understand it and know it a little bit better now that it's my third time. And yeah, I'm so excited for you and I to get into it. It's been a moment since we've been here. I know that we made a video a couple years back when the world was very different about NFTs and digital art. If you're interested, I will put it up somewhere here so that you could check it out también.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk about Semana del Arte because there's so many different things. But just to give you an overview, there's fairs. So there's large contemporary art fairs, which is Zona MACO, for example. We have Zona MACO, we have Material Art Fair, we have Salón ACME, and then we have, also Clavo and QiPO, which are kind of like smaller to mid-range art fairs. And then we also have like gallery shows, there's DIY spaces, the museums also have a lot of art going on. So there's something really everything for everyone and for all tastes. This is my second time going. The first time I went was actually with you, Edgar, when we went up to a material art fair, and it was also such an experience. And I'm really excited to kind of just like reflect on what we saw and how it's changed. I think there's definitely a lot of things that I saw this year that I feel like I didn't see the first year that I went, which was 2 years ago, I believe. So yeah, I'm excited to get into some of that and then hopefully see if any of you are interested and intrigued by what we saw and, would like to come out and check it out.
Yeah, well, let's start with like some of the biggest things that happen during Semana del Arte, which are the art fairs. And so I think we could maybe start by talking about what it was for us to go to Zona Maco. And, is it okay for me to share about
Yes.
why we were so excited about Zona Maco this year?
Yes.
So Linea de Luz had their art up at Zona Maco this year, which is so amazing. We'll definitely share some photos here for you to see. Such a powerful experience to see your work at that scale amongst thousands and thousands of people. That's something we want to mention about Sonamaco is that it draws a huge, huge crowd and be ready to be overwhelmed.
Yes. Oh my God. Literally, one, be ready to be overwhelmed. I believe it's the largest contemporary art fair or the most important in Latin America. So you get a range of pretty much all of the major like artists, galleries in the contemporary art sphere from all over the world. And yes, I was very blessed and fortunate enough to be selected from an open call by a DAO called Palm DAO. And it was really exciting because they focus on educating people and onboarding people about Web3 and blockchain. And we were the only booth displaying fully digital art, which to me was very exciting and very different from our experience 2 years ago. The question still remained, where is the digital art? ¿Dónde está el arte digital? Pandeo was definitely the center of that at Zona
Mhm.
MACO. And we saw a lot of other booths as well, exploring with this materiality, working with digital artists. And it was very interesting because, like Edgar says, it's very overwhelming. There's a lot of people, so it's definitely a great place to, to have your art seen and to show your art. And there's something for everyone. There's obviously still a lot of more traditional mediums like painting, a lot of 2D mediums, and definitely some more kind of like bold propositions. They also have a section on design. They also have a section for books and things like that. So it was definitely very varied. But yeah, Edgar, what did you, and you had been to Zona MACO before, what were your thoughts and how did you feel about this edition?
Yeah, I was really impressed. And I think, you shared how your booth was the only one that was fully digital art. I think I was excited to see that there were more artists who were in that conversation, working across different mediums and also bringing in the digital. But I was also really excited that Palm Dao decided to show artists at Sonamaco who are not represented by galleries, which is, I think, a
Mhm.
huge thing
Yeah.
that, all the artists who end up at Sonamaco are, what we would call maybe blue chip artists that
Yeah.
share their work around the world, who have galleries. But, Palm Dao really brought in artists who are big in our NFT Web3 community and maybe not known though to some of the folks who that go to Sonamaco or that, traverse within the more traditional art realms. And I think that to me was really exciting to see that kind of what I would even say subversion or
Yeah.
transgression within that space. And, I was also just really struck by, yeah, the innovation, the risks that artists were taking in creating work. So many pieces were so moving. But again, I highly recommend if you're going to go to Sonamaco to give yourself plenty of time because there's so much to take in. I definitely would say at least 3 to 4 hours, take a break in there in between. And one thing that was really big for me was the artist Amor Munoz spoke with one of
Mm.
the folks from Palm Dao in an incredible conversation, and they talked a lot about how important it is for artists to really not be limited by mediums, to not be limited by narratives around like the economy or the art world, and to really reclaim your sovereignty around your practices. That was something I really took away from that conversation. And seeing, both of them as being artists that traverse between these mediums, it was just so, yeah, so great to feel galvanized as an artist that also traverses these realms too.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you say. I think for me, the big part that was very interesting for this, and in terms of the digital art, was the fact that it is very subversive because it is making us rethink our relation to how art is not only displayed, consumed, and also thought of. Digital art is fine art, and a lot of digital artists are not only digital artists, it's a medium and it's a format that they're using, and they're working within so many other avenues and materials. And I think it's so important for these spaces, one, like you said, this conversation to be had, for digital art to be socialized, for people to be informed about digital art and contextualize it really as just another medium and another tool and another format that contemporary artists are working in. And I think that it just made me feel very affirmed for both of us because it made me it reminded me of who stole that time when you came for art week and we had our Portal Pandeo and we were talking and we were imagining what digital art can look like, beyond the screen and in different spaces and within the context of art week. And I felt like it was almost us really calling into that vision that we had that when we had that show, which was then another
Yes.
great artist, Josie Corona, shout out. And I
Yes.
think it's just like very, very important for us to remember that this is something that's going to keep happening and it happen and it's going to keep expanding. And I think that Palmdale, and I think also that even Zona MACO giving Palmdale this type of space and this type of format also in relation with the talk to be able to share and to be able to generate these dialogues are super important. And it makes me really excited that a lot of artists like us that work within these mediums will be given, you know, a space and a platform to talk about this because it's very, very important. And I think to me, it's the most exciting thing that's happening in the art world, like this transition. And again, it's something that's impacting all of us. We're all working
Yeah,
within digital mediums, within digital formats, or we're using, you know, different digital tools within our creative practices. So yo creo que es súper necesario estas conversaciones. So I think
sí,
for me, you know, seeing you, for example, in front of my piece in Zona MACO was so amazing because like remembering you encouraging me just a couple of years ago in 2020 to get into NFTs and, you know, Web3 and start talking about these blockchain technologies es muy importante. And more than anything, seeing these conversations happen within Latin America and seeing other Latin American artists que están siendo platformed in a way that
right.
is very subversive because yeah, none of us have a formal gallery representation. I think that that's very beautiful and it made me feel very aligned for us to be there and for us to generate these spaces and these conversation. So for me, obviously I'm biased, but I think for me that's one of the most exciting things about Zona MACO was having that digital arts presence there from the Web3 space, right? And I think that that's
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah, and I just want to really highlight, that project that you mentioned, Portal Pandeo, because I think it's really important to, name that this wasn't the norm just a couple of years
Yeah.
ago. That,
Yeah,
you know,
literally
li
like 2 years ago.
2 years ago, like LineaDeLuz and I literally went to some of these art fairs and we were asking around, ¿Dónde está el arte digital? And a lot of people were like, what? Or not here, like,
Or el
and
arte digital no se vende.
no se vende, aquí no nos dejan hacer eso, like, so to see this shift happen so quickly, and
Yeah,
to also see, as you're saying, that our question responding back to us in
yeah.
such a powerful way, it's so exciting, and I want to like make sure that we show your nails because you were wearing
I
your
will.
nails. Yeah,
¿Dónde está el
please.
arte digital?
¿Dónde
Yeah,
está el arte digital? Where is the digital art? Really continuing to ask that question because, as you
yeah.
said, this question is still needs to be brought into this space.
Yeah, and the question as a place of possibility and a space of creation. And I think that that's very exciting because, yeah, 2 years ago, the landscape looked very, very different, you know? For example, another big fair, Feria Material. Yeah, what did you think about this fair? Did you see any digital art there? What do you think would be the biggest difference between this fair and Zona MACO? Tell us a little bit about what you noticed.
Yeah, so I would say that it was a very different vibe. So Zona MACO, just so folks know, is super far away from lots of the like maybe places that like, at least where I was staying was really far for me to get to. It's really spendy. And whereas Material is actually like right kind of in the middle of the city where I was like, I don't really know the city that well,
Yeah.
so it felt more accessible to me.
Más céntrico, definitivamente. More
See,
accessible. Also by public transport, which I think is very
yeah,
important for Zona MACO. Really, you had to take an Uber there. The traffic can be very, very heavy. So it's a little bit more out of the way. And obviously, because of the size, it's really only one of the few venues that can have and host an event that size. So that's
yeah.
something to consider. But yeah, I think what you mentioned is important for Material Art Fair. Definitely smaller. The location is more accessible. And in terms of the art, like how would you describe some of the art that you saw there?
Yeah, I would say that it felt like a lot more experimental. There are
Mhm.
definitely more either mid-career or emerging artists
Yeah.
that are in this space compared to Sonamako. But I was really excited by so much of the art I saw there. I didn't see maybe a lot of digital art, but there were so many works that were in conversation with the digital realms.
Mhm.
I think, as you were saying earlier, so many artists are working within the digital, even if they're producing sculptures or paintings, that there is a digital element that you could really feel within the space. And I would say I was just really blown away by a lot of the material risks or
Mhm.
experimentations that
Yeah.
artists were taking. I was also really excited by the curation. It just felt a lot more easier to take in. And I think it's also because of the size, as you mentioned, that it's a lot smaller. I would say Zona MACO, as I said, you need maybe a full day to see that
Yeah.
fair. Whereas Material, you could definitely maybe hit up a couple of fairs if
Yeah.
you're wanting to go to Material and maybe to another fair, because it maybe takes a couple of hours. But yeah, I was there for the preview, and it was really packed, but then I heard it got even more packed for the actual
Yeah.
opening.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely recommend like going early if you can. It is a really exciting time. I saw lots of people I knew, and it was a great space to really connect with others and to really celebrate the art that people are making all over Latin America and the world.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, in terms of accessibility, also the price range, the size is a little bit more manageable, but even then it can still be very overwhelming
Yeah, no,
because it
definitely.
is it is packed. And I think it was very interesting because honestly, all of the events that I went to had a good number of people there, which could also even be on borderline excessive too, because there's just so many people and you want to see the art and you want to take it in. So I think that on that sense, it's very interesting when you're going and you're wanting to take in all of these different art and all of these different fairs. But definitely, like take your breaks, like, soak it in because it can definitely be so visually stimulating. I think for me, Material, I saw a lot of works that I really, really enjoyed. Definitely more experimental. I think definitely for me, a lot of aesthetics that are more in aligned with the type of work that I'm doing, that I'm seeing a lot of my contemporaries doing. So that's very,
Yeah.
very exciting. I like that there's definitely a lot more risk in terms of the curation, in terms of the proposals. And I really, really enjoyed that fair. I think that, like you said, it's more manageable, it's experimental. The last floor was also for design, and they had like some very interesting installations where people can kind of like sit and interact and have a drink. So yeah, a lot of these fairs are also kind of a good place to network, to meet people, to talk to people. They have beverages. For example, Zona MACO had food. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of just like chat and, be out and be seen and see other people. So I think that that's something that I really like about these fairs too, is that it kind of brings everyone out and it brings everyone out with the intention to see art, to share their art, to talk about their art. So I think that it's a very, very great place to just kind of like go, take in the art and also just kind of see, who's talking about what's garnering interest and what are some of the visual narratives that are happening. So I really enjoyed that about Material. I definitely feel like it has a lot of contemporary experimental visual languages, and definitely some political messages too. There were definitely a couple of pieces that were very provocative and that were very politically explicit, like very clear in their message, and which I very, very much so appreciate about that.
Yeah, I think that's like a big difference between Zona MACO and Material is that Zona MACO feels a lot more established, and for that reason, it's maybe a more conservative,
Yeah.
and the work is ready to be hung, ready to be
Mm,
installed in someone's nice house.
yeah.
Whereas Material does have some of that element, but there is a lot more risk-taking, a
Mm,
lot more experimentation in the curation and in the art making, and I think a lot of these artists maybe feel a little bit more freedom to be able to take some of
yes.
these risks. Even though, of course, as we know, these art fairs run on sales and run on money. And so people are still trying to sell work. You know, one artist that comes to mind is an artist I love very dearly is Narsiso, who makes these
Mm,
incredible images on bags or cardboard. And
yeah.
it could be cardboard from the produce like shipping containers for produce or Whole Foods bags. That's, for example, that's what Narciso used in the material work. And
I
to me, that
really
was
like that
really
one.
exciting. I love their work, and but really thinking of this idea of would something like this maybe exist at Zona MACO, right?
Yeah,
Someone selling Whole Foods bags with drawings on them, right? Like
yeah.
it just really makes me
Yeah.
think of the excitement to witness that type of work being platformed and celebrated and sold.
And
Because
sold,
yeah,
yeah. And I think that's amazing because I think what I really appreciate Narciso's work is the evocation of this presence of brown bodies that are
yeah,
often rendered invisible in the food
yeah,
system, and that yet are so crucial because they are growing our food, they are picking our food, they are the ones that are literally getting, the food to our table. And I really like that, it's, Narciso's using these materials that also bring in the day-to-day task of, what carries our food and what surrounds our food. And you know, seeing that and also knowing that a lot of Narciso's pieces were sold like makes me really happy because it's that type of ambitious work and that type of representation that honestly makes me have faith in, whatever the art world can be. So I
right,
think that seeing that type of presence and that type of celebration and that type of acknowledgement, and I think also belief of the gallery to platform an artist like that with those
yeah,
narratives, I think is so important and special. And yeah, I wonder, is this something that you could see at Zona MACO? And Zona MACO definitely has these different like narratives of style that, they can even be, like bigger pieces. Also, the price ranges can be, much higher. So I think that definitely in terms of materiality and concept, I think it's one of the enjoyable things about material. Mhm.
yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. And I'm just gonna say that I was there, during the preview in that space. It's a Charlie James gallery from Los Angeles, and I saw the people working there, and they like could barely keep up with people wanting to buy pieces. So it's really
Ooh.
great to see this work flying off the walls, and
Yeah.
people being really excited about it. Yeah, and I think, maybe we could move from here and to talk a little bit about some of the other fairs that happen, because as these are the two like biggest fairs, but there's so many other fairs. I think we didn't even name all of them, to be honest. I feel
No,
like we're probably forgetting
honestly,
some.
like this is not a like whole review of Semana del Arte because that would just be, we would need hours for that. So
Yeah,
another really big one is Salón ACME, which I did not go to this year. I believe Edgar didn't go either.
no, yeah.
That's also, I've been to that before, and I think, have you
Hmm.
been to that one before?
I
Yeah.
have too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's in a beautiful location and it's also very convenient because it was a few blocks away from Material. I personally did not go this year because, in all honesty, another thing that is worth mentioning is that these fairs cost money. They cost dinerita. So obviously they range from different price ranges, but a girly out here could not afford to go all of them. Even though, we're
Right.
out here, we're artists, we're doing it, we're making it work.
Yeah,
Um,
and we're open to press passes.
we're
If
open
anyone
to
wants
press
us to come and make a
passes. Si
review
quieren que platiquemos y
a
hagamos
su
un review,
servicio.
estamos a su servicio, a su disposición. But yeah, I heard a lot of good things about Salon Acme. I had a couple of friends that showed pieces there, and it sounds like it also went well for them. I know that they also had a big Semana del Arte party as well. So I heard very good things about it, and hopefully we can make it out there next year
Yeah.
again. You
Yeah, we'll
know,
definitely share some photos so that folks can see how beautiful it looks, because I do
yeah.
recommend it, even though we didn't have a chance to go. I do really recommend it.
Yeah, definitely. I heard a lot of good things about it. There's also Feria Clavo, which Edgar and I went to that one as well, 2 years ago. That's another smaller art fair that's also kind of emerging artists. I actually did go to that one this year because I had some friends that were showing work, and also very experimental, very interesting. I think that a lot of different range of materials were used as well. Also a lot of different galleries, a lot of different artworks, a lot of material propositions, a lot of different aesthetics. So it's like a reoccurring for these fairs. Like it doesn't matter if like one is smaller than the other. Like at the end of the day, you're still taking in a lot of art. It's still like hundreds of projects. It's still hundreds of artists. So I think like at the end of the day, visually, it still ends up being quite a lot of things to take in.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what's funny. It's like when we say smaller, that's so
Yeah.
relative.
Literally, it's yeah, it's challenging, but yeah, we're talking about smaller, but we're still talking about a lot of projects, a lot of different artists. We're still talking Clavo, I think, was 4 floors.
Okay.
So, 4 floors, and let's say each floor has maybe like 5 rooms, and each room
Wow.
has maybe 3 to 4 different galleries or projects. So, you can start getting an idea of, small can still be very relative. There's also QiPO Art Fair, which I didn't have a chance to make it to either.
Yeah, but I think it's another one of those kind of emerging underground fairs that we actually had a couple of friends who had work that they were showing. One of our friends named Okote, who is from the Web3
Yeah.
community, was showing some holographic work that he's made there. And so there are like kind of, yeah, it's other emerging fairs. I did see like another fair on the news while I was there. I don't remember the name of it, but it
Yeah.
was like by Banco Azteca, I think was like promoting it. And so I do feel like people are jumping on board and like making their own fairs. And
Definitely.
so,
So it sounds like we need to make our own digital art fair. Somebody
yes.
avienten dinerita our way because we
Hmm.
can, yeah,
Banco
definitely.
Azteca, we're
Banco
here.
Azteca throw some dinerita our way for the digital arts. But now speaking about the digital arts, I want to talk about some of the smaller shows. Again, like smaller still it still means a lot of production and a lot of proposal and a lot of great art.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to talk about some of the other ones that we went to that I think were still amazing. Like I think like Edgar and I, like we finished the week so tired because you're just like jumping from one show to another and you're talking to people and you're taking in all the sights, all the sounds. And there's a couple that we went to that we really liked. The very first show that we went to, I think for Art Week that started it off was Rafa Esparza and Guadalupe Rosales, which was at the Commonwealth and Council. And Edgar, tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, it was so, so incredible. We walked into the space and the artists were there, which was really wonderful. We got to chat with them for a second. And the mediums are so beautiful. There was
Mm.
Guadalupe created these gorgeous photographic prints
It
inside these highly embellished frames that were made, I think, of like some sort of metal
was like glass, I believe.
or glass, was it?
It was like, yeah, they were reflective. It was like,
Like shiny, yeah.
it was like a shiny reflective surface. I do believe it was glass and it was like etched glass.
Oh yeah,
With
but are you
like,
talking about the sculptural works, right? Like, because they're
but
they're
also the frames
the frames too.
of the
Okay.
photographs. Yeah. We're gonna
Oh,
put some
awesome.
images, but just
Yeah.
beautiful works. What I really liked about that one is that I think both artists have such interesting visual languages. And Edgar and I had just actually seen both artists show work at the Made in LA at
Yeah.
the Hammer Museum. So it
Yeah,
was
yeah. It was
very
actually
cool.
Guadalupe was at the Made in LA show, but Rafa showed years back, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that show with, having again like this, it was almost kind of like this bridge that was like generated these conversations and like the materialities. I think their works are in conversation so well with one another. And I think for me just to see that, and I think for both of us, being Latinx and seeing that type of like visual language displayed in this setting in Mexico, I think it was very beautiful, and it was also it brought up like a lot of questions and a lot of bridges in terms of the narratives around identity and how we express that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, being someone who was, born in East Los Angeles and grew up here in Southern California, and is so excited to be making connections in Mexico. And I really feel like their work is this beautiful bridge of celebrating both like Mexican culture, Chicanx, Latinx, East LA culture. It is
Mm.
really bringing together these aesthetics in a really beautiful, magical way. And, for example, Rafa had these incredible sculptures that are made out of Nike Cortez
Oh,
shoes
yeah.
that were just so magical, looking like phoenixes, like birds, like
Very
águilas,
mythical,
very
very
mythical.
mythical. Yeah, I think I really enjoyed that work too, just because I've like not only the craftsmanship, but again, like this visual mythology of these images that growing up, Chicanx in Southern California, we have very present of like these like mythical and otherworldly symbols. And I think like drawing that with, the Nike Cortez, which is another very well established symbol
Right.
of, East Los culture. I think that yeah, I think it was just very well done. A lot of people were there. I ran into a lot of like homies there. And I think that it's just so interesting to see the impact that these visual and material explorations have in Mexico. And it was definitely it was a pop and show. Like I think for us to start off Art Week in that way,
Yeah.
I think was so fun and so refreshing. And I really like that across from that was a archive of a gay artist in Mexico that was around, I think, during the 70s and the 80s, which I had never heard of, but they were there kind of like sharing this person's work that was, working also within sculpture, within painting, within drawing. And I think like having these narratives too of like queerness and identity in this space, I think works so well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, one thing that I'm kind of connecting to the earlier conversation we were having is how incredible it is that artists are using their mediums to really help transmute, transcend,
Mhm.
transgress against some of these hierarchies that we've seen of value,
Yeah.
of understanding, of and like I'm kind of specifically here thinking about how the digital art and
Mm.
traditional art hierarchy, right? That there can sometimes feel like there's a hierarchy. And in a similar way, I've definitely, as a, non-Mexican, Mexican American artist, have also felt this like divide between either you're a Latin American artist or you're
Ooh.
a Latinx artist, and that there is this like hierarchy too, right? And I do feel like artists are using their mediums to build bridges, to
Mm.
really transcend some of these hierarchies. And it is so exciting as an artist to witness people really creating something that is helping to bridge and also transcend. Like that to me is maybe a theme that I could kind of see in my practice and also maybe in some of the practices that we saw during the Semana del Arte.
Yeah, I think I 100% align and agree with everything that you're saying. And I think it's so interesting because it reminds me, I think something so powerful about what I saw in this exhibition at Commonwealth is that, yeah, you're questioning the narratives of the more traditional or normative art world through identities and practices that for a long time were, othered, were, pushed to the side. And I think to see these in a place that is like, valued and represented and shown reminds me a lot of the narratives and the things that we're talking about with digital art, right? It's these things of like, no one really knows yet, like really how to place this, like where this
Right.
goes, how to talk
Right.
about it, how to show it. But at the end of the day, like it's bubbling up to the surface to the point that it's undeniable for these things to have a presence there.
Mm,
Y
yeah.
regresamos a lo mismo, el hecho de que esto es en México, el hecho esto that these conversations are being made in Spanish, they're being made in Spanglish, that are being made in English, that it's like this amalgam of all these different things coming together. And I think like there's something so powerful within that like messiness too of like finding these places of exploration que realmente me gustó bastante. And now that I think about it, like a lot of the works that drew me in Zona MACO, in Material, have a lot to do with representing this idea of identity and subverting it through these visual languages and creating visual aesthetics that do evoke a presence of queer communities, of Latinx communities, of Chicanx communities. And I think that that for me is very beautiful in that sense and in that space.
Yeah, and I think that it speaks to the ways in which we are organizing ourselves outside of these binaries or
Mhm.
borders, that we're using many times these digital means to create cultures and connections
Yeah.
that are really affirming of our identities and also are, creating something that is bubbling. I love that you say that because
Yeah.
I feel that bubbling, and I think this could be a good moment for us to maybe talk about some of the things that are bubbling in
Yes.
Mexico City, that there are, these, we're talking about fairs and galleries, but then there are many, many things bubbling up in the city that are being self-organized,
Yeah.
DIY, underground. So that is also huge in the city
Yeah.
too. And I want to make sure that we give that some space and time. And yeah, I wanted to start talking about us going to this amazing performance art event that we saw at a space called Revuelta.
Yes,
And
Revuelta Queer House in
Revuelta Queer
Roma.
House
Mhm.
in, sorry,
In Roma.
in
Mhm.
Roma, yeah. Yeah, and we saw these two incredible performance artists do a performance that was very durational, very intense, very like physically intense,
Mhm.
and I feel like really called us to be present with them and their process. It
Mm.
felt very ritualistic,
Yeah.
and it was on this rooftop where, we ended up dancing for a while too afterward. And so I really also want to name that it was also a community space where a
Yeah.
lot of folks got to connect and make out and, do lines or whatever they were doing. Like, I
De
feel like
todo.
de todo. And I think that's also something that is exciting, that there are spaces where folks are coming together. And this is primarily a queer space too, which I
Yes.
think is really exciting to see that queer folks are self-organizing to bring folks together.
Yeah, and I think that's super important that you mention about these, DIY spaces because it reminds me how a lot of the normative mainstream art world really sometimes gets, well, maybe not sometimes, but gets effervescence from these types of spaces, porque
Mhm.
aquí es donde se generan las propuestas, aquí es donde
Sí,
se genera lo más subversivo, lo más experimental, and I think it's these types of spaces that really have a cornerstone in building the converse and building and moving the conversation forward about what art can be. And I think that, yeah, these types of spaces, and I think, for us, being queer and, being part of that community and working within these spaces, it's always so important for us to kind of like connect and see, what other artists are doing. And again, like it reminds me a lot too of this commitment that we have as queer artists, as queer digital artists, as, artists that work through a variety of mediums to build spaces for the community to interact, for the community to party, for the community to socialize. And again, it reminds me so much of our Portal Pandeo, where we had a digital artist support circle, and I think that it's so important to really realize how a lot of the work that's being done in these spaces does push the needle forward, even though, the amount of people that there might be limited, or that it's a smaller, more intimate space. I think it's within these spaces of intimacy and vulnerability that a lot of the really great connections and aesthetics get made and proposed. And I really like that you brought this up. And I also want to, touch a little bit upon, kind of like the pop-up itinerant digital projection space that we had. We were walking around Roma, and for
yes.
those of you that I don't know, I have a small projector that I kind of like walk around and do guerrilla projections on the street. And, Edgar and I were doing that, walking around Roma. And again, it's this question of where's the digital art? The digital art is also on the streets. The digital art can also be made and can be, performative, and it could be spontaneous, and it could, occupy the public space. So I think that that's something really fun. And I always like to see, the way that we can playfully show our art and demonstrate our art. I was also doing like these small itinerant digital desktop screens where I intervened Barbie laptops and Barbie desktops, and I displayed some of my own digital arts. I think it's like really fun and playful because it's important to remember that us as digital artists and as queer artists, and as artists, working within more experimental and performative ways, we always find ways to, be part of the conversation. And it's very much of this energy of like, if you're not making a seat for me at the table, like I'm either bringing my chair or I'm making my own table out of whatever I can find. And I think that that's super fun and super encouraging too, that a lot of people are doing this.
Yeah, and I really am so, so grateful that you're bringing this up. And I think that I just really want to highlight what you said about how much the art world benefits from artists experimenting
Mm,
and organizing and
mm,
creating work that is maybe too subversive or wouldn't
mm,
be allowed in these spaces at this moment,
yeah,
but that years later, these communities eat it up and then are
yeah,
showing it. And so I think I want to just like remind you that like if you feel as an artist that your work isn't good enough to be shown, or you're wondering why you're not included in these fairs, create your own spaces. Know that these people need you. They need your
yes.
work. They need your visions, like,
Mm,
because they at some point end up using them. And so this is kind of like a call out to these institutions with money to
yeah,
say like support DIY
yeah,
self-organized events, artists who are experimenting, give us money because you end up later on benefiting from all that
yeah,
experimentation and labor that artists put in. And so really just want to highlight that because I think that's important to really name that, you
yeah,
know, I think a lot of folks can sometimes feel like this work isn't valuable, but it's
yeah.
so valuable and so needed, and really benefits culture at large.
Yeah, I mean, it's always contributing to the conversation and it always adds so much like nuance and so many different perspectives. And I think that, unfortunately, and we've talked about this, like we know that the traditional hegemonic art world is very hierarchical, very capitalist. It has a lot of issues within it as well. But at the end of the day, I think it's important for all types of art and voices to be included and funded, because at the end of the day they either end up consuming our message, they either end up appropriating it, they either end up like looking for us later on. So I
Yeah.
think it's also very important to know that like we're artists and we deserve to get paid in our lifetime, and we deserve to share our art in these spaces that at the end of the day make everything a little bit more interesting, make everything so varied, make everything, just more diverse, and it ends up, contributing to the conversation. So I always like really like to emphasize like for Art Week, there's so many different spaces and spheres that you can get into, and there's so many different types of art that you can get into. So I think it's always worth to like, obviously, yes, go to the big art fairs, but also like look for the more subversive, organized group shows and also support them, go buy tickets for them, if you can buy, a lot of this art is much more affordable, for the average person, buy their work, share their work, document it, make your own videos talking about what you saw. I think that that's at the end of the day very, very important.
Yeah, yeah. And I think maybe coming back to the question that we asked at the beginning of this video, is it worth it, right? Should you go? If you're on the fence, if you're
Mm.
wondering if you should go, is it worth it?
Is it worth it? I think for me, it's a big resounding yes. It's 100% worth it. But I think it's, again, be very clear about what your intentions are. Know that it is a lot of resources, not only like monetary, but also energetically, physically, it's a lot. It's a lot because you're consuming people's visions and you're getting, different aesthetics, and you're seeing what people are creating and making. And a lot of this art, it goes from, very subversive and impactful and political and, and very transmutational to, more abstract and ethereal and things like that. So I mean, I think for me at the end of the day, it is worth it. And for me, it will always be worth it when I can access art that is outside of museums, art that is, maybe not shown directly to us right away. Because obviously, when we go to a museum, there's been a lot of different relations behind that that has allowed the artist to be shown in that context. So, one of the good things about these art fairs is that it really allows you to see, at least to some extent, what is being done right now. And I think that is what's most valuable, whether you're an artist or whether you're a patron or a collector or a curator, or just the general public. I think that's what's very interesting. So for me, it would be a yes. It would be a very cautionary yes of like, know what you're getting yourself into. At the end of the day, it's something that's very fun and that could be very rewarding. So it's a yes, but also support your local artists, support your like local subversive queer spots and venues. So Edgar, what about you? Tell me.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you said. Definitely a resounding yes, you should go. I'm actually wanting to go next year too, and which will be my fourth time going. And
Yes.
I
And
wanted
hopefully we'll be showing some more work. Maybe we'll be hosting a little event. Maybe we'll
we're
be speaking at a
available.
panel.
Yeah,
We're available. Book us.
yeah,
Hablamos
hosting
español.
events, exhibiting
De todo.
work, pláticas de todo. It's like, let us know. You can find our contact info. But yeah, I want to say, like, it is so exciting as someone who, is really wanting to deepen into my personal
Mhm.
professional connection to Mexico and to Latin America. Like,
Mhm.
I feel so excited to be able to, in a condensed amount of time,
Yeah.
connect with so much, and
Mhm.
not just art but people and practices and cultures and communities. Like, there is just so much to tune into, and I feel like I've definitely met a lot of incredible people from these trips. I've made some friendships, and I'm just so excited to invite you, as someone who's thinking about going, to see if you're interested in that, if you're interested in having a condensed 4 to week-long, period of more art and
Yeah.
culture than you know what to do with. Like you said, with caution, with a plan, maybe make an itinerary if that's your thing,
Yes.
because there is so much to do, and do your research,
Yeah.
because so much happens outside of the norm. And so definitely ask around,
Yeah.
ask a punk, ask a queer, ask an artist friend,
Yeah.
look for
Ask us,
people,
send us a
ask us,
message.
aquí
Be like, hey, what are you
estamos.
up to? I'm in town. Let's
Yeah,
go.
let us know. We are just wanted to make this video because we were just really excited by our recent experience, and really want to make this as a resource for other folks who are, wanting to go, who have similar questions, and who
Yeah.
maybe resonate with some of the themes and things that we brought up in this conversation.
Yeah.
This is an open conversation, so feel free to leave a comment. Let
Yeah.
us know if you have any questions,
Um,
anything specific you want to know about going to Art Week in Mexico City. Aquí estamos.
Yeah, let us know if there's also, if you want us to make a follow-up video and talk about specific artists that we saw, specific things. Again, there's so many. I have so many photos on my phone. I have so much just like excitement for all of the things that I saw. And I think like I agree so much with you, Edgar. Like it's making me, I want to go next year and I want to see also like how the scene is changing, and also like I want to take advantage, like, what do you envision for next year? Like, what are your like oracle powers telling you? What are you forecasting for this upcoming art week? What do you think are going to be some of the things that we're going to see more of, see less of? What are you thinking?
I'm seeing a lot more bridges being made, a lot more connections between the disciplines, between
Mm,
communities, between themes, practices.
mhm,
And I think with what you were sharing around that, artists that was next to Rafa and Guadalupe's show at Commonwealth and Council, a lot more blurring and blending and transgressing time, working with time as a non-linear practice where we can really bring in the past, go into the future, you know, like just
Mix
grab
it
it
up
all
in the
together, mix
cauldron,
it up in the
like,
cauldron. Like that's what I'm
uh-huh.
envisioning, just
Yeah,
not being limited by time
yeah,
or borders or hierarchies. Like I
yeah.
feel like artists are really saying like we are fucking going into this. We are
Yes,
letting you know that our practices are magical and we are changing culture. So
yes, yes,
so excited to see artists
yes, yes.
downloading, sharing, envisioning their magic with us. Because
I see
yes,
that.
yes. Yeah.
I
How about
see.
you?
I see
What are your
that.
oracular gifts sharing?
I'm getting that so this year I saw more textile works, more things like installations and sculptures. So I'm next year I'm seeing a lot more altars, a lot of things that are invoking kind of like this like three-dimensional installation space, but with like this ritualistic feel to it. I'm seeing a lot more embellishment. I'm seeing a lot of
Mm.
queer art. I'm seeing a lot of femininity. I'm seeing like a lot of
Yes.
like this like boldness. I agree with what you say, a lot of blurring the boundaries of materialities. Definitely a lot of things. I'm seeing also like clothing take on a new sculptural performative element, like as like art
Mm.
objects. So I'm seeing that.
Amazing.
We're gonna see more artwork. Definitely gonna see a lot of the selfie take more prominence. I
Yeah.
saw a few things, also like things, but I think that next year I'm gonna see more of it. I'm gonna see more of these narratives of the selfie. I'm hoping, I'm wishing. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. And again, like digital art is gonna keep pushing. It's going to keep breaking these boundaries and it's going to come in louder and clearer than ever. So I'm really, really, really excited for that. I'm ready. I think we're ready. We've been calling it forth for a while. I know
Yeah.
that this year you and I will like concoct many, many things. So viene
Viene
algo,
algo.
cada vez más.
Be on the lookout.
Be on the
Set your
lookout.
notifications, porque ahí vienen las cosas.
Ahí vienen las cosas. Ahí vienen las cosas. Oh, pues we've talked about a lot of things. Hopefully, some of this has resonated with y'all. Please leave us a comment, leave us a question, connect with us. We definitely, want to keep you posted, about what we're seeing, what we're noticing. And yeah, we really hope that this has been even just like a dip in the waters, inviting you to explore more of this type of format of, consuming and viewing and appreciating art. It's a lot, but it's so amazing and it's so euphoric.
Yeah, and definitely check out our description. We're gonna be like tagging some of the artists that we talked about. We're definitely gonna be showing photos and also links to us if you want to reach out to us. Say hello. Thank you all for being here with us. We really appreciate you and definitely just hope that we can come back again soon because we want to make more videos and share more about our experiences, porque hay más que platicar de seguro.
Mucho más que platicar. If you want to leave a comment and be like, hey, y'all should make a video talking about this, like, we're down. We enjoy the
Yeah,
conversations. It's always a pleasure talking with you, Edgar. Like,
yeah,
siempre hay mucho de
thank
qué
you.
platicar y siempre se dicen cosas maravillosas. So thank you so much for the time. Thank you thank you to everyone for like watching us and listening to us. From your two fave Latinx Brujx artists, conjuring from the digital sphere to you, coming very soon to your city, opening the portals.
Yeah, see you soon.